Have you ever walked into a crowded place and felt a pressure in your chest you couldn't name, as if the room itself were whispering instructions you didn't ask for? Maybe you stepped onto a packed subway and suddenly felt anxious for no reason. Or you scrolled a comments thread and found your mood sinking because everyone else seemed outraged. That invisible current, the low hum of worry, the sudden chorus of excitement, is not magic. It's a psychological weather system, and it quietly steers a lot of our choices. Today you'll meet a character who learns to hear that weather literally. And through his mistakes and discoveries, you'll learn a practical toolkit for recognizing when the crowd's mood is information and when it is noise that will mislead you. His name is Alex. One ordinary Tuesday, Alex stood at a city crosswalk when a delivery truck clipped a parked car, and for a moment, the street turned into a hive. People clustered, faces tightened, voices rose. That evening at home, Alex discovered something odd. He could still hear a faint undercurrent. Not the words, but a tonal quality. A low, sour vibration that felt like the echo of the crowd's tension. At first, he thought he was tired. Then, over the next week, the same thing happened in different places. At a concert, the air tasted like electric joy. At a protest, it was like a distant siren. At a viral live stream, it sounded like a swarm of bees changing pitch. He wasn't hearing literal voices. He was tapping into what psychologists call emotional contagion, the nonverbal transmission of affect that spreads through mimicry, micro-expressions, vocal tone, and yes, sometimes through our imagination. In scientific terms, it's powered by mirror neurons and simple social feedback loops. You see someone smile, neurons in your brain simulate that smile, and you feel a little lighter. You see fear, your body prepares to flee, but Alex's unusual sensitivity made him treat these moods as reliable signals. He started using them to make decisions. When the street hummed worry, he'd avoid the place. When it chimed anticipation, he'd buy a ticket or join an event. Initially, it felt like a superpower. He avoided confusion and caught opportunities. Then it began to betray him. He missed an important presentation because the surrounding chatter had a low, anxious rhythm he mistook for danger. He invested in a trend because the online mood sounded like an approaching tide of excitement, only to watch the market reverse the next day. Why did the crowd lead him wrong? Because groups are noisy systems with two major problems: emotional contagion and apophenia. Emotional contagion makes moods spread like ripples in a pond. Apophenia is our brain's tendency to detect meaningful patterns in random data, to hear in the noise a message that isn't there. Together, they create a hall of mirrors. You see people reacting, you react to them, you confirm your reaction by watching others react to you, and suddenly a tiny spark becomes a bonfire. Philosophers have warned about the will of the crowd for centuries. Psychologists call it herd behavior. Economists note how it produces bubbles and crashes. The key insight is this: the crowd's mood is sometimes a true atmospheric reading, a real emergency, a real joy, and sometimes it's a local amplification of noise. The practical question is how to tell the difference. Alex's story becomes useful because his mistakes show typical failure modes, and his corrections give us a replicable method. Here is the framework he learns, and you can use it right away. A 3-step signal check that turns fleeting vibes into actionable information. 1. Sense. Notice the mood without immediate action. Become the observer. Take a literal pause of 5 to 30 seconds and name the feeling. This is anxiety. This is exhilaration. This is tightness. Naming reduces the intensity because it moves the reaction from limbic, automatic, to prefrontal, reflective. 2. Sample. Actively gather small, independent data points that test whether the mood reflects reality. Ask yourself 3 quick questions. Who benefits if this mood spreads? Is there direct evidence of the underlying cause? News reports, first-hand accounts, objective indicators? Or is the evidence mostly social? Likes, retweets, shouts? What alternative explanations exist? 3. Distance. Create a buffer before committing to a consequential choice. This can be time-based, wait 1 hour one day, or role-based, ask a disinterested friend for input. The buffer reduces the impact of contagious affect and gives the signal time to resolve. Alex failed when he skipped one of these steps. He trusted the immediacy of the mood and assumed it was a calibrated signal. He succeeded when he learned to treat his sixth sense as a radar, not an instruction manual. Now, let's break these steps into practical micro-tools you can use in daily life, translated from Alex's trial and error into a toolkit of short exercises and rules. Tool 1. The 15-second name and breathe. When you first feel the crowd's hum, on a street, in a comment section at a meeting, Stop and take 15 seconds. Inhale, exhale, and say aloud or mentally, "This is X," where X is the simplest label you can find. Anxiety, excitement, contempt. Labeling disengages the automatic loop and gives you immediate cognitive clarity. Tool 2. The 3-point sample. Quickly collect 3 independent signals before deciding: an eyewitness report, an authoritative source, and a quantitative indicator if available. Ticket sales, news, stock volume. If 2 of 3 are social signals, retweets, shared posts, and none are direct evidence, treat the signal as fragile and avoid high-stakes moves. Tool 3. The contrarian hypothesis. For every sense of certainty you feel from the crowd, imagine a plausible opposite explanation. If the crowd cheers and you feel compelled to join a purchase, consider that cheer could be coordinated marketing, bots, or an isolated local event. Putting on the contrarian hat doesn't mean you will always be against the crowd. It simply forces you to examine alternatives. Tool 4. The time delay rule. For decisions with meaningful cost, impose a minimum wait. 1 day for purchases over a threshold, 1 hour for emotional replies, 24 hours for personal confrontations if possible. This is a simple dampener on contagion. Tool 5. The skeptic swap. Before taking action, ask one person who is likely to disagree. Social proof confirms, dissent refines. Alex found that a single candid skeptic often revealed the assumptions the crowd had accepted unconsciously. Tool 6. The emotional thermometer. Rate the mood on a 0-10 scale. Is the low hum a 2 or a 9? Lower magnitudes suggest local noise. Tool 7. The signal audit. After you act, check the outcome and write down what cues were reliable and which were not. Over time, you'll train a personal antenna calibrated to your environment. To make these tools easy to use, here is a compact checklist you can carry in your mind before any crowd-influenced decision. Pause and name. Sample 3 independent signals, run contrarian hypotheses, weight according to stakes, consult one skeptic, rate intensity, audit outcome. Each item is short, and together they transform a gut reaction into a reasoned choice. To cement the lesson, let's return to Alex and watch these tools in action. At a farmer's market, he heard a bright, upbeat chorus around a new stall. The crowd's mood sounded like opportunity. Instead of buying on impulse, he paused, named the feeling, anticipatory excitement, sampled, a vendor's price list, direct indicator, 2 locals who knew the stall, eyewitness, and an online review, authoritative. He applied the contrarian test. What if the excitement is a one-off discount? And still found value, so he bought 1 item and left. Later, he audited. The product was good, and he learned that excitement accompanied actual quality here. Contrast that with the time he joined an online frenzy over an investment. He heard the high shimmer of triumph, skipped the sample and the skeptic, invested, and lost money when the social buzz collapsed. His audit taught him the difference between durable signals and ephemeral noise. Throughout the video, you'll see these moments visualized. People on streets with stylized audio waves above their heads, graphs that show how emotion amplitude spreads, and annotated checklists that appear beside the protagonist as he chooses whether to act. These visual metaphors help translate internal states into visible data, which is exactly the skill you're practicing. Now, a few conceptual clarifications so you can wield these tools wisely. Emotional contagion is not bad. It's a social glue that enables cooperation and culture. Apophenia is not a moral failing. It's a cognitive shortcut that helped our ancestors find patterns fast. The problem arises when we treat socially amplified states as objective facts. Social systems can be self-reinforcing. Panic leads to panic, enthusiasm leads to enthusiasm, and both can outrun the facts. Understanding this is an invitation to epistemic humility. The crowd knows many things, but rarely everything. That humility shifts your role from passive follower to intelligent participant. A brief philosophical aside. There's a difference between being influenced and being manipulated. Influence is natural. Manipulation is engineered. Companies, political actors, and opportunists exploit emotional contagion by designing stimuli that maximize spread. Catchy slogans, outrage-inducing headlines, calibrated outrage loops. Your toolkit is partly a defense against designed manipulation. It preserves 2 virtues central to flourishing: autonomy and sociality. You don't have to withdraw from the world to think clearly. You only need a set of small practices that interrupt unreflective contagion. Finally, let's make this concrete with 3 daily exercises that train your 6th sense into a reliable radar rather than an impulsive compass. Exercise A, Morning Signal Review. Spend 5 minutes each morning scanning headlines and social feeds. Name dominant moods you notice and rate their intensity. Ask yourself which of those moods would matter for decisions you'll make today. This trains sampling and intensity calibration. Exercise B, the 1-minute contrarian. When you feel pulled by a social mood, give yourself 1 minute to write a plausible, simple counter-explanation. Doing this habitually weakens apophenia. Exercise C, the weekly audit. Once a week, list 3 decisions you made under crowd influence. For each, record whether following the crowd helped, hurt, or was neutral. Note the cues you missed. Over months, this audit sharpens your antenna. Remember, the goal is not to become emotionally flat or cynical. Empathy and social resonance are human strengths. The aim is to choose when to ride the wave and when to step back and check the tide gauge. Think of your perception of the crowd as a radio tuned to the emotional frequency of the room. Tuning gives you music. Turning the volume down gives you clarity. Alex's final insight, the one that transformed his life, was simple. Treat the hum as data, not a command. With that stance, he navigated crowds more safely, chose opportunities more wisely, and stayed connected without being carried away. If you want a compact memory aid, use the acronym SSD, Sense, Sample, Distance. Sense the mood, sample independent signals, distance before acting. This 3-step habit is your anti-contagion shield. If this toolkit felt useful, try it today in a small way. The next time you feel swept by a crowd, practice the 15-second name and breathe and run a quick 3-point sample. See what changes. If you liked this exploration of how the crowd's mood moves us, and you want more short, practical tools that combine psychology, philosophy, and clear, usable habits, like this video, share it with someone who tends to follow the roar, and subscribe to Mind Unlocked for a steady supply of mental toolkits that help you think better in a noisy world. Your like and subscription help us create more guides like this, and sharing this video is the easiest way to bring these practical strategies into the real-world conversations you care about.